Hello and welcome to another episode of the GetPsyched show. Today I'm joined by Gareth Gorman. Gareth has just completed his Masters in Sports Psychology and is looking to start his Level 2 to become an accredited Sports Psychologist. We talk about the pathways of this journey, the challenges it brings, as well as the opportunities that are out there. Gareth also spoke through his recent Masters research about the psychosocial support for players after suffering a concussion in rugby. We also look a wee bit into the future of sports psychology and how it can get involved more in grassroots sport. I hope you enjoy this episode. It's really interesting. Gareth gives a great oversight of everything he's been involved in. If you do enjoy it, please leave a review and share it with a friend. Thanks. Hi Gareth, how are you?
Not too bad, George. What about yourself?
Yeah, all good, thanks. Thank you for joining us today on another episode of the GetPsyched show. Just to start with, could you give us a very sort of brief introduction of who you are, where you grew up, and sort of where you are at with your career?
Yeah, listen, thanks a million for having me on. Suppose at a young age, I was sport mad, played every sport under the sun. Um, really was just involved with just the enjoyment of playing, and it wasn't until I got injured playing rugby that this sort of playing career, if you can call it that, sort of stopped, and because I wasn't able to stay involved in sport through the participation and competition aspect, it allowed me to look at other ways to stay involved in sport. So that would have been through coaching. I was then involved in a lot of paid and voluntary roles, working with um, in a range of sports and exercise settings through maybe outdoor instructing, swimming coach, athletics, maybe working with young people, improving opportunities to engage with sports and exercise, um, and my sort of own experiences of injury as well, understanding some of the psychological responses and the impact as like an athlete, and how injury sort of impacted me. Um, and that's how I sort of fell in love with this sports psychology sort of field, and it led me to go on and complete a undergrad in psychology at the University of Strathclyde. Absolutely loved it. Loved psychology. It was a really, really big benefit because sometimes when you go into this, there's a lot of hidden sort of topics that you're not a big fan of, statistics being one of them. So really, really enjoyed psychology. And then returned to Belfast to complete a master's in sports and exercise psychology at Ulster University. I finished that in the summer, autumn of 23, and then just graduated there in December 2023. I'm now sort of in between that stage of kicking on and completing my stage two on sort of my professional development towards accreditation. And I've met you through working with the Glasgow University women's rugby team, where I'm currently coaching at the minute there as well. So yeah, that's where I am at the minute, and sort of a wee bit of a brief sort of summary of how I got maybe involved in sport and involved with sports psychology as well.
Excellent, good stuff. So yeah, as you said, you did your undergrad at Strathclyde in psychology. Was that just a general psychology degree?
Yep. So that was just a Bachelor of Arts with an honours degree. It was I was quite fortunate that I knew quite early on sort of what my career path would be, and I think sports psychology was that end goal. So it was fortunate enough to know exactly the pathway to get there. So psychology was that first option, and it did help that I had a love of psychology going into it, and that sort of love and passion sort of pulled me through, especially during sort of COVID years when studying got a wee bit tougher. So that was just a standard degree, and you cover a wide range of topics. So anything from social psychology to clinical psychology to the psychology of physical activity. So there's a wide range of topics that you'd cover within that course. Yeah.
And did you have sort of I know maybe sports not a specific one, but did you have a sort of general area that you found as your favorite?
Yeah, I think it changed every semester. There was always, I think, psychology is such an interesting topic that each semester when there's a new module, you really sort of delve really deep into it, and I think you sort of, within that maybe 3 or 4 months, it was your favorite subject in the world, and the semester would change, and you would jump back into another one, and you submerge yourself in it. I think for me, it was social psychology was a really really sort of interesting topic. I think, especially sports psychology is known for borrowing a lot of topics and concepts from a lot of other fields within psychology. Social psychology being a big one. So it was quite nice to sort of have that underlying psychology knowledge of some theories and concepts that are then used within sports psychology as well. So yeah, it was really, really interesting to sort of understand them before seeing how they're applied in a sports psychology type area. So I think that was a favourite of mine. But the whole course was very, very enjoyable, just because there's a whole range of topics that you go on and cover.
Yeah, I think social psychology as well for me is sort of up there because it's something that you can not quite put into practice, but you can understand in a real life setting really easily because you've got your own examples, your own experiences where you can go, this is a theory, this is what it explains, and then oh yeah, I can think of a situation where that's real. And then of course when you've got a passion for sport, it's easy to put that in a sport context as well. We're going to come on to a bit more
Absolutely.
about your yeah. We're going to come on to a bit more about your sort of master's degree a little bit later. But you talked about going on to your next stage of becoming an accredited sports psychologist. So it's quite it's a path that not many people I think are aware of what steps you have to take to become I guess an accredited or official sports psychologist. So you've completed your masters. Could you explain about what the next step is? I think you call it as stage two. What does that involve, and
Yeah.
how do you become an accredited sports psychologist?
Yeah, there's two principles routes within the UK to working towards that sports and exercise psychology sort of type term, that protected term. Both of these routes sort of lead to your health HCPC accreditation. That's the Health and Care Professions Council, and that gives you that legal right to use that protected term, sports and exercise psychologist. Um, so the stage one would just be your undergrad and your master's degree. My undergrad in psychology and your master's in sports and exercise psychology. Now, these would need to be accredited by the BPS. Then, for you to jump on to the British Psychological Society's qualification in sports and exercise psychology, you might have heard this be referred to as QSEP. So you'll have your bachelor's degree and your master's degree. And then that sort of gives you a theoretical underpinning knowledge of what psychology is. And this stage two then is where you apply this knowledge in your practice. Um, so it's a qualification that involves 2 years, a minimum of 2 years of supervised practice. It's where you apply your knowledge, your ability to consult, work with effectively with clients. They've got 2, 3, and 4 year options as well. People usually go for a 3 year option as well because it works out to be about a submission a year. And these submissions could be submitting a portfolio of evidence on your progress, your competencies, your philosophy as well. And then once you've achieved this, you're eligible to register then with the HCPC as a qualified practitioner in sports and exercise psychology. So we've got about 3, 4 years of supervised practice, a few submissions. There's a bit of research element as well within the BPS's QSEP process. But then at the end of it, then you come out with this sports and exercise psychologist title, and you then go on and practice within the field. There is then a second route that you can take within the UK, and this is the British Association of Sports and Exercise Science. What I heard this record are called BASES, and they've got this accreditation route called the Sports and Exercise Psychology Accreditation Route, or SEPAR. And then again, to be eligible for the route, you undertake your undergrad in psychology, your master's in sports psychology, and then you kick on to do your 2, 3, or 4 years supervised practice, and then after that you'll meet the requirements for your HCPC registration, and then get accredited as a sports and exercise psychologist. So that would be your two main routes, especially within the UK, to gaining that HCPC registration, and then becoming that sports psychologist and using that protected term, sports and exercise psychologist.
Excellent, good stuff. So yeah, as you've explained, it's not as simple as sort of doing your undergraduate degree and then a little bit more extra work and then you're there. It's many years of work you have to put in to get to this level, but that sort of assures the quality of I guess a protected term as well of a sports psychologist. Um, for the years where you after your master's degree where you're working in this sort of this stage two in this sort of supervised role, what does that mean? Are you doing the same exact work as a sports psychologist, just with someone always there, or are you given chances to go and work independently? What can that sort of look like in during this supervised term?
Yeah, so the supervised practice is really just you going out and finding work yourself. You the supervisor's there really just to guide you, and ensures the quality of your work as well meets the standard. So usually when you enroll in these stage two, you have to obviously have a supervisor. And I think you definitely shop around, as different supervisors will offer a range of different things. So I think it's really important to be sort of this informed consumer. Maybe look at what they're researching, what is their field of expertise. Sometimes even thinking about whether you're actually going to get on with the supervisor. You are going to be spending 3 or 4 years listening to them, letting them listen to your own experience. So you think you need a bit of a connection with someone, and they're really just there to guide you through this stage two process. So you'd be going out and working with clients, and then feeding back to your supervisor some of the work that you're undertaking, and then you'll discuss with your supervisor what you're sort of doing, what went well, what can you improve on, and they're really just someone, just a thought partner, someone to bounce ideas off, and keeping yourself right in the stage two process. So yeah, it's really just about going out and finding that work, but also your supervisors there to sort of guide you on that pathway as well.
And what sort of examples of work are there out there for someone in this stage? Is there lots of opportunities, or is it quite difficult to find these opportunities to practice?
At the minute, it's getting a lot better. There's more opportunities now than I think there ever was. I think during your training, you maybe need to look at building connections. Um, I think talking to peers who are much further down this pathway, I think they say that they maybe regret not knocking on a few doors earlier on, trying to build that connection with people, asking if there's any potential hours going. Maybe you have to do initially some work for free, or at a small sort of fee. And then most of the time you'll start working within a youth setup, or development level. It's very, very rare that you'll jump straight into an elite setup. So I think the more experience you gain, the more doors start to open up as well. So I think it's for me, it's key to build some relationships really early on, whether that be within a team. I know initially people start work within a university team because of the connections they've built while being at university. So I think there's a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more jobs. It's about knocking on people's doors, and initially taking whatever work and experience you can get. Experience in the field is really, really tough. Although I do think there's a lot of skills required in being an effective sports psych. Sort of how you communicate, how you facilitate relationships, your active listening skills, that are something that could be built upon through voluntary or paid roles within sports, whether that be through coaching, or working with athletes in some other type of role. Similarly, you could be working with members of the public in a gym, in an outdoor recreational centre. These are all real valuable experiences that you're working with members of the public, or athletes that you will eventually go on to work with, and it's really, really giving you those soft skills that are really, really important to be an effective sports psychologist. Um, so reaching out to a large range of potential options, not narrowing down where you want to work, being very open-minded, and you'll get your foot in the door somewhere, and start applying your knowledge to a range of different environments. For me, I've done a huge amount of voluntary roles, whether that's shadowing an S&C coach. I used to shadow Johnny Pedlow, who's a S&C coach for the Northern Irish women's soccer team. Um, I knew I wasn't going to go into the S&C, but it's nice to work within that high class environment. What skills do these coaches and backroom staff have? Um, you're learning the terminology, the lingo, at how they're all set up, and it's less daunting then when you go into these world class elite environments, because you've already done it. Maybe not in the role that you're there to do it now, but you've experienced that and you've built on these skills. So you'd be working in a range of environments. Initially it's going to be that youth and development setup that you'll get yourself into. But you also have got that exercise psychology setting, whether you're working with members of the public in the gym, in health referral opportunities as well. So I would say be very open minded. Try not to be so narrow in when you're looking for experiences and jobs, because any experience is good experience.
Excellent. You've almost, or you pretty much have answered my next question about gaining experience, I guess, when you're a bit younger, and all those examples you gave are exactly that. That a chance to sort of practice actual sports psychology isn't really there until you've gone through the steps and you've learnt all the theory. But being involved in that sport environment and the soft skills, as you say, of active listening and understanding the lingo is so important. So, yeah, I think just being in that environment and taking everything in and meaning when you have got those high level skills, you're a lot more comfortable going in. I think that's a really good point. So you completed your masters in Belfast in sports psychology. There are a range of different masters courses across the UK in sports psychology. Are these all very similar, or do they differ in sort of the content they provide? So does it matter where you go to do your masters, or is it all pretty similar? It's just the next step that different places offer.
Within different master's courses, there will be similar topics that obviously will need to be covered. However, with I know there's a range of masters out there. I think I was just scrolling through Twitter and seeing that there's a topic on esports in a sports and exercise master's course. Not too sure on the university, but it's a brand new type of quite exciting area within sports and exercise psychology that obviously they're bringing into their master's courses, because you will find in the next few years there will be a big interest in this esports and the psychology around performance in esports. So I think you will find little topics and areas of study within these masters differ slightly. I think sports psychology is moving really, really quickly. You'll find the stuff that I would have studied in my masters recently might not be there in 2 or 3 years, or will have adopted into something different, and there'll be a range of topics that will be covered that maybe wasn't covered in my masters. But generally between masters, they will have a certain topic that they will have to cover. But each master has a range of areas that you'll cover. And I think picking that master's degree, you can go onto the university's website. You can see exactly what the modules you'll be covering, and some of the topics around that. So if you are shopping around, I think for a master's, have a wee look at what you'll be covering, because I think there's a range of different topics that masters start to cover now. I think that esports one is a really good example of how um, they're trying to adapt and provide a larger sort of area of expertise, maybe not just your elite sport type environment. You're looking at other environments as well.
So once you've completed your accreditation, after you've done your undergraduate and your masters, and I guess you can call yourself officially a sports and exercise psychologist, what are the options after that to go on and work? Is it only with elite sports, or is it with a range of people, or other options as well?
Yeah, I think. it's very, very rare for sports psychologists. I think as soon as they're finished their pathways and they're accredited with a HCPC, um, to become a sports psychologist full time. I think you'll find there's a lot who would balance this consultancy practitioner role with um, maybe a university lecturing role, maybe becoming a assistant or associate, um, maybe kicking on and doing a PhD sometimes is an option. But you'll find that a lot of people will have to balance this role of being a sports and exercise psychology with some other role, maybe within sport, whether that be coaching or working within university as a lecturer. So there is a lot more job opportunities. There still needs a bit of experience, and with experience, again, we're talking about there's more opportunities, more doors start to open up. So initially, you have to be prepared that you're maybe not going to be doing this full time, and that there does need to be a balance with something else to supplement that. And then with experience, there'll be a lot more opportunities start to open up, and then you can start doing this sports and exercise psychology role full time.
So obviously during your practice and becoming accredited, there are different ways that you do that and different learnings you have to go through. So how much is it sort of theory based and how much is it practical, and is there a balance or is a mix, and can that change day to day? So how does that look in the balance between theory and practice?
I think definitely with the undergrad, um, initially there was only a module. It's in my final semester during my final year of psychology that looked at the psychology of physical activity. Maybe I touched on sports psych in a module in A level P, but this is the first time that I was maybe starting to study sports psych, and it came at a really difficult time where last semester of the last year you're filled with dissertations, you're applying for postgrad courses. It's a real busy time as a student, so it's really hard to engage in that course. But I think during your undergrad, there's a lot of opportunity for placement, especially within the psychology course. And then you can go out and find some real quality placements in areas of sports and exercise. And I think at this stage it's important to work with as many different athletes in as different sports settings as possible, building your knowledge of different sports, starting to learn the lingo, sort of really helped me connect with athletes. So initially there's a little bit of theory, and it's really up to yourself to go out and try and find that practical element through your placements. And then during your masters, it's mostly all theory. Especially in that 1 year course, you'll have a few assessments, maybe developing delivering a psychological skills workshop. You may have to write case studies around the sort of mental health and physical activity interventions. So you apply your practical knowledge in these. That's where I think maybe being within a role within sport, whether you're involved in coaching or as an athlete, alongside your masters, can really start to implement some of this theory into your coaching. Maybe stuff around building effective relationship with your team, team cohesion, team dynamics. You're starting to really to apply this in a practical setting, because again it's really hard to do this in a 1 year's master's course. So having this on the side is a really good idea to start applying this practical knowledge as well. And maybe if you're competing as an athlete, you can start then integrating some psychological skills, maybe goal setting, imagery, visualization, coping strategies to deal with anxiety, into your own game. I think it gives a real sort of valuable insight into work what you started learning in the classroom, and bringing that into to sort of a real world experience. And then definitely in your stage two, with your supervised practice, it's then taking that knowledge that you gained in stage one and then just applying it. So it's all very practical. It's all hands on. I think initially you'll realize that each master's degree, I think there's that huge focus on psychological skills training, goal setting, imagery, visualization we talked about. And then the more you sort of go into this practical experience, you realize that these psychological skills training isn't going to be the fix for every problem. And I think initially you've covered these in your masters, you're a bit more comfortable with what you've learned. I think initially when you go into this more practical environment, we're quite rigid in our approach to these interventions. You're taught what goal setting is, but you're not really learn this with much consideration to the client specific needs. And then you soon realize you go on this journey to explore your consultant philosophy. You have to be a bit more flexible and adapt to your client and not just sort of justify your involvement there as a problem solver, but more as a facilitator. Um, so initially for me, maybe delivering a workshop, I found myself more distracted by trying to coach myself through that process. And in my head, I was recalling back some feedback from lecturers, maybe information I read in papers, and this could be really sort of. I think it maybe was reflecting on some anxiety I had and some doubt about my actual ability to present this workshop and my own ability to sort of use this knowledge and skills in a more practical and hands-on environment. So it can be a real challenge, but I think once you start to learn, you start to adapt these sessions. Once you've done it once, these distractions sort of become less and less, and you
Mhm.
start to focus more on the people in front of you or in the room. So there's a good mixture of theory and practice. I think it's very, very difficult in the masters to have hands-on experience given the sort of really short time period. There's DPSych options that you can go on and do through your accreditation route, and these would just be after your master's degree. Um, Maybe it'd be about 3 years or a 2 year course, um, and they give that really good balance of theory and practical element through your placement opportunities, and that's another way of getting accredited through this HCPC route. So these DSEGs offer that opportunity for you to study and also have that practical hands-on element as well at the same time, which I think you really struggle to get in a 1 year's master's course. But I think for me, it's having something alongside the masters where you can start implementing some of the stuff that you're learning in the classroom, whether that be through coaching or as an athlete yourself. So that, I think it's really important to sort of have that balance of theory and practical as well.
Yeah, excellent. And I think sort of when you were talking about implementing the theory, that I had a good way of putting it is always you've got to speak the athlete's language. So there's no point coming in with this whole idea around goal setting and it's got no relevance to what they're doing, or it's not the right time of the season, or they don't understand the language you're using. So speaking their language, I think is a good way, and that practical experience is sort of the only way you can learn that.
No, I think is just even not speaking that language or just being in that environment. Sometimes initially it's quite hard to rock up and present the workshop or start talking to a client about sports psychology when there's no relationship, when you haven't built up a rapport with who you're working with. So within these roles, it may take a bit of time. You may have to just chill out in the environment, pick up the cones, set up the drills, just be there. And I think that starts to form some relationships. So I think then when you go into this sort of consultancy role, people are a lot more comfortable in opening up your relationship with that person as well is much stronger. So definitely it takes a bit of time, and it may just mean that you're just chilling out in the environment, and initially you don't go on all guns blazing, putting all your psychological skills on the table and saying, pick one, what are we doing this time? It's about understanding what the client needs, and that just takes time in their environment as well.
Yeah, there's good examples of in sport as well when a coach might come in and they there was a good example a couple of years ago. Harlequins had just won the league, and a new head coach had come in, and he said about the first sort of 2 months he didn't really do anything. He didn't try and implement anything. He just stood back and watched what was going on, and built a picture from that. Not only just with relationships, so people felt like they could trust him, but also that he can see where there are areas of needs and what he can add, rather than just coming in. This is what I believe, we're going to do this. So yeah, that's is a good way of approaching it. I think last sort of question on the pathway stuff. Obviously, you do a lot of theoretical stuff throughout your degrees, But are there other ways or mediums that you're able to develop this theory side and learn about it that aren't just through university degrees? Are there other resources out there that are beneficial and that maybe have helped you in your progress?
I think there's loads of resources. I think more than ever, you can go online, you can find whatever concept or theory that you want to look up. And I think um, for me, I really enjoyed in preparation for my master's, and just as I was finishing up my psychology degree, I jumped on the Open University, and there's a ton of free courses that starts to build your knowledge, build your portfolio as well um, of a range of different topics, and they're all free. You can do them at your own pace. They're all online as well. I think they really were beneficial. Um, it sort of broke down some of the language, and it gave really good examples, so you could learn at your own pace, and you can go and understand, use other resources with that as well. Similarly, I think then when you're on that master's course, I loved reading papers and journals that maybe discussed more applied work, books with case studies. I think these are a really good insight into how sports psychologists work. I think we cover the theory, and especially coming from psychology, the sports psychology, you pretty much know the theory really, really well. I think then it's just taking this theory and maybe how do we apply this in a real world setting. So um, reading sort of journals or papers with more applied work or case studies, I think is a really, really good insight. Similarly, social media is really, really good to engage. I think I don't really engage with Twitter that much, but I love following a load of sports psychs on that. There's some really, really good discussions as well in the comment section. I would be a wee bit wary just about how much information is out there. So if you are on Twitter or any other sort of social media, definitely have a look at who's tweeting this, who is this person. Maybe look at their bio. They usually have HCPC registered, or there maybe be a lecturer in a university. I think social media, Twitter especially, is a really, really good place. You just have to sort of pick through some of the misinformation, some of the opinions to get to the really good facts. And I think as well, now, within the last 3 or 4 years, that my attention is now turning to this stage two. I think you've seen a lot more students on this pathway, the stage two pathway, maybe using Instagram as a way to sort of document their journey towards accreditation. Um, I enjoy there. They're pretty accessible. They'll have comments that you can ask questions. Um, it's really, really nice to get an insight as well into what they're doing day to day. So if you can find someone who's on that stage two pathway, they'll have this Instagram page set up, and they'll cover what they're doing in their applied practice, but they'll also be maybe covering concepts that they would use throughout their their sort of day to day life, and it's really, really nice that you can understand how they're applying that. Um, and I think finally there's I underutilize LinkedIn. I think it's a really good tool, sort of for connecting with maybe who peers who are maybe on the pathway or maybe completed the pathway. Um, Maybe look at what their experience is, where did they go to university, their own experience in completing their degree, and then you can go and look at what they're working at the minute, and it gives you an insight in what that day to day life as a sports psychologist might be. And then I think finally, it's just signing up. I think the BPS has a division of sports and exercise psychology. I think it's called DSEP. They've got student memberships, and they run loads and loads of workshops. Um, they have presentations of recent research, and I think I love just jumping on, even if it wasn't a topic that I was interested in. It was nice to see how they presented their research, the terminology they used, and some of the language they used was really, really a really good insight into sort of again preparing myself for that masters. So I think there's loads and loads of information out there for someone who's wanting to get involved. I think just then picking through some of the less good information to get to the good stuff is needed.
Yeah, excellent. You've given so many examples there and given me a few ideas of what I can be doing on top as well to keep developing. I think it's right that there's so much information out there, so it is about finding the right stuff. But I think we live in a time as well. I was speaking to my brother about this. We're so lucky that 20 years ago to access a lot of these journals and a lot of the papers was almost impossible if you weren't involved in an institution or something. And while that's still difficult, there's so much information out there that's processed and put in a way that you can understand it as well. So, yeah, I think if it's a route you're keen to go down, just keep reading, keep learning the language, and involve yourself. But yeah, lots of opportunities outside of a degree to keep learning about it. Gareth, you've just completed your masters and looking at the stage two, and you're involved, or you've got thoughts about getting involved in a research project as well. Could you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah, so it was my master's sort of thesis, the dissertation project, and the whole purpose of the study was just to explore um, rugby players' experiences of social support following a concussion. And it was really just to better understand some of the unique challenges concussion presents in the provision and preference for support. And support, or social support, at least emerges as quite an important sort of coping resource for athletes during their rehabilitation and reintegration back into sport. I think having that real supportive environment has shown to be really, really beneficial in recovery. And concussion is such a huge topic now, especially in rugby. However, I think concussion presents some unique challenges and differences to other sort of sporting injuries that make the provision of support quite nuanced and complex. I think firstly, it's an invisible injury with some other overuse injuries. That absence of swelling and bandages, maybe the crutches that provide some evidence of injury. I mean, some of the athletes may not garner the same level of support as athletes who with a more visible orthopedic injury, or someone with a big sling over their hand or a boot on their leg. Secondly, it's quite hard to identify some of the symptoms and individualize someone's treatment plan, and support them through that, because some of the post-concussive symptoms overlap greatly with your psychological responses to the injury as well. And similarly now, I think it's really, really topical issue. Um, Concussion management and some of the return to play guidelines um, are more focused on that physical aspect of concussion recovery, while largely it ignores the psychosocial aspects of recovery, and that's your readiness to return to play, and that social support aspect. Um, and I think concussion is so difficult as well because the prognosis and recovery timelines are so uncertain. I think there's so many factors that can influence the symptom duration and intensity that make concussion, and definitely the provision of support, really complex, and it is, I think, amongst one of the most complex injuries to assess, diagnose, and manage. So that's sort of what the whole research was about. It was identifying the experiences of rugby players, social support going through this recovery from concussion, and identifying some of the barriers, and what can we improve on going forward, with the hope of maybe improving an athlete's sort of concussion recovery journey, and supporting them through that.
Excellent. There's so much I want to unpick with this, and it's actually a project or something I thought about for my dissertation about this idea of the support from a concussion. As you said, it's almost like an invisible injury, and to give a time detail or a time length for return can sometimes be impossible, because if you've done something to your knee, doctor can tell you, right, 6 weeks and then you'll be back. Concussion, they can tell you just rest, but you could be 2 months until you're better. And as well, that idea that social or physical activity can be so incredibly important for someone's mental health, to be able to socialize and move about, the endorphins with all that, we all know the benefits of it, and not being able to participate in that and just saying you just need to rest, or what the consequences of that. So it's interesting. What were your sort of first steps with the dissertation?
I think initially it's it's quite difficult. There's a lot of ethics to get through. You apply to do this research, and you have to understand why you're doing it, the purpose of this research. Um, as well, concussion. It's you maybe be discussing some challenging times in those athletes' careers. So you have to be really conscious of reliving that past. And some people do really seriously their concussion journey is quite isolating, and reliving that experience can be a bit difficult. So there's a lot of paperwork needing done to apply for ethics and get ethical approval on that. And as soon as that's ticked off, then you can start to go and actually start the research, maybe recruiting participants. So I was recruiting rugby players within Ireland. I was able just to send out as much information, and getting club representatives involved, and giving contact details, advertising on social media. And we were able to get six rugby players back, and we were just sitting down with one-to-one interviews, and yeah, just letting them talk me through their experience. They're the experts, in this, because they're the experts of themselves. They understand what they went through, so it was just understanding some of the barriers and challenges um, they went through. And then after that, you get your data, you start writing it up, and then it goes towards your master's dissertation, and along with that, you present the findings as well in a presentation. So it's a lot of work crammed into quite a short space of time. But it's something that I really really enjoyed doing, and I think that enjoyment sort of meant that I didn't mind jumping back on the computer, 12 days in a row to keep going. So really really enjoyable sort of research, and then we'll hope to kick on now and get it published.
Excellent, good stuff. And were you using were the players current players or were they former players?
So it was a mixture. So within the six, there was two who retired from sport due to their concussion, and
Okay.
the rest then reintegrated back and recovered, and were back competing. We were quite cautious then to to take rugby players who've sustained a concussion within the last 12 months. I think any um, any longer than that, you're getting into those COVID restriction years where
Hmm.
providing support and being there for someone was slightly difficult. So athletes would have sustained a concussion playing within rugby in within the last 12 months. And they would talk me through their experience. Some retired from sports. Some went back to playing. Some then went back playing maybe a level below, and maybe didn't return to the same level that they'd gone back to.
Could you talk a wee bit about sort of the findings as well overall, and then what are the next steps with the research? What more can we find out about this?
Yeah, so the research, I think, identified some barriers to engaging with support, especially with concussion. We acknowledge that invisibility of concussion. There was definitely maybe feelings of guilt asking for help, because physically you seem okay, but you're really struggling with symptoms. There's athletes talking about how they'd rather more a bandage around their head to provide a more visible sign of injury. So I think people still struggle with the invisibility of concussion. Again, it doesn't garner as much support as someone standing with crutches on the sideline, compared to you maybe standing and you still look physically healthy and fit, but you are experiencing symptoms of concussion as well. So I think people struggle with that invisibility aspect of it. There still is this culture of sport as well, and participants did acknowledge that there is that difficulty engaging with support, sort of due to this culture within rugby that values toughness, and sort of creates norms of playing through injury, and minimising symptoms
Mhm.
as well. So if really just enduring pain, playing while injured, is sort of see as a rugby player's identity, and this culture then that validates this toughness creates a hesitancy, or for athletes then to report concussions as well. So there's still that culture of sport that needs tackled, and a culture within rugby as well that puts people off seeking support. And then there's a range of inconsistent information and guidance that was identified, especially maybe there's too much information out there, not enough knowledge with regards to concussion. And this has sort of resulted in the participants sort of following an inconsistent guidance and recommendations, especially with the return to play protocols. They're misunderstood amongst players and coaches at the minute. And then sort of athletes who experience more persistent symptoms, usually lasting maybe 14 days or more, are sort of met with limited guidance on how to best manage these persistent symptoms. And similarly, within these return to play protocols and concussion information, it doesn't mention any social or psychological aspects of the return to play protocols, and they're often ignored as well. And I think these inconsistent information, I think, is maybe reflective of the individualized care that's needed and the approach to the concussion recovery. It's not really a one size fits all. So it means this guidance might be misinterpreted or inconsistently implemented because the guidance and is there just as guidance, and we should maybe take a more individualized approach to each athlete and understand that this one size fits all. And then went on to identify that there's some of the social isolation that the players experienced. Players then experienced this loss of sporting identity as well. I think we are past that stage of cocooning after concussion. We're now moving on to seeing the benefits of graduated return to physical activity, and understanding how that can help with the social isolation and loss of sport and identity. We had people who maybe missed sport for 30 plus days more, and experienced or expressed, putting on weight, or maybe not feeling like an athlete anymore because they don't have that routine of getting up in the morning, going to the gym, going to training, and to lose that identity as a sports person. And then finally, some of the other findings just identified their preference for support. So at what stage of the recovery are they more likely to want support or perceive to want support from? So we're looking at maybe your support network. Is it your friends, family initially at the start, and then as you return to play and go through those guidelines, you're starting to then turn to your coach and other teammates as well. And we maybe looked at what type of support you need at that stages as well. So that's sort of the main findings in a really sort of condensed form. Now we're sort of just looking at getting this journals that would publish it. So it's a lot of work of just identifying the right journal for the paper.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, you've covered so much, and for people that are in sort of a rugby environment or understanding of it, it'll all make sense. I think you speaking about the culture is such a sort of resonating point where it's people play through injuries the whole time, whether it be through a season, they'll be strapped up, they'll be taking stuff just to get through games. And although that's part of the game, a concussion, I think, needs to be seen as this isn't just an injury you strap up, because the effects might go quite quickly in a couple of weeks, but in 20 years' time, what position are you going to be in? And as well on the guidance as well, I think it's such a true point. We only this season saw the concussion guidance being extended, I think, for a week in Scotland, and obviously they've just reduced the tackle height across the world in many places. And the research on whether this is going to reduce concussions is only just starting. So our knowledge on the issue, on the topic, is in its infancy stage. So I think over the next 5 years we're gonna see a lot of changes. But research like this is what we need to pick the holes, find the holes, and see what needs to be done. So yeah, good to hear, and I think there's going to be more along these lines. So a really really interesting piece of work. Why were you interested in this specific area around concussion and rugby, and I guess the social support that's there?
Yeah, I think initially, thinking back, I was involved with rugby, and it was my own rugby injury that sort of first sort of kick started this. So I got a few too many knocks in the head, went to hospital, thought it was concussion. A few CT scans later, it turned out to be a brain hemorrhage, and that then stopped obviously my participation in rugby, but then kick started this fascination with the psychology of injury. Became interested in the field, um, keeping up with the research and the gaps of research within both the psychology of injury, but also with the concussion guidance as well. That moves fairly quickly, and there's loads and loads of topics on that. Um, so that was why I sort of wanted to get interested in the sort of the research. There's also Ben Robinson. He was a rugby player, studying in a school actually really really close to mine. It would have been sort of our local derby when our two teams came together. But unfortunately, he passed away at the age of 14. I think he became the first person in the UK actually to die of second impact syndrome while playing rugby, which is a condition um, in which you experience a second hand injury before completely recovering from the prior one. So I think there's a lack of education that sort of contributed to some of the poor decisions in his game. And Peter and Karen, I think Ben's mum and dad, have invested a large amount of time into sort of raising awareness of the dangers of concussion and brain injury in sport. And some of you've maybe seen the "if in doubt, set it out" type messages on players' armbands and posters around rugby. All would have came from this type of thing. So that was really sort of why I was really interested. Concussion is really a topical issue and has been for the last 5 or 6 years, especially in the States, when we're seeing a lot of American footballers talking about head injury in sport. So there's a range of factors, and it's my own interest in it and own experience in it as well led to this fascination, and I think that's why I wanted to then go on and pursue and help people understand what concussion is and how we can best manage and support people with concussion and head injury in sport as well.
Amazing, thank you for that. And I guess not it's your interest in it. You wouldn't say it's a reactive from your injury, but it's maybe inspiring and part of the reason. But I think this society's perception and approach to concussion needs to be a really proactive one, where people are educated, people know what's going on, and the systems and guidance in place is sort of accepted as the norm. A good example people use is the helmets in cycling. But when they were introduced, it was like, or if you're going to wear a helmet, you're going to be crazy. And then it becomes the law, and within 5 years, you're the crazy one if you've not got a helmet. So I think we'll get to that stage, and more research like this will help that. So yeah, thank you for sort of sharing that. Moving on finally to, I guess I like to call it the future of sports psychology. Looking forward, we're both young guys, so we've got a whole career ahead of us. So I guess it's sort of getting excited about what the future holds. Firstly, could you just talk a bit about your ambitions in sports psychology, what you hope to go and do, if you've got goals of working at a certain level or with certain teams, and what sort of that looks like? Would you prefer to be in a team setup, working with a national body, or doing more private work? What are your sort of personal goals within the field?
I think I'm at this stage where there's so many different ways to go, and I think you don't have to close off a certain way. I think initially when I got into this, it was I think many people when they get into sports psychology, it's working with those elite teams, hearing these stories about sports psychologists that work with these high performing athletes and getting to go behind the scenes of these really big sports teams. Um, so initially, that was sort of the whole idea. I thought that was fantastic, really, really cool. The more I've sort of then went on and completed my studies, and I've attended some maybe conferences or chatted to people or heard presentations. There was some really really interesting areas that you can get into within the sports and exercise psychology, and I think it's again from the research I've done, I've really enjoyed understanding sort of transitions in sport, and understanding athletes who maybe are ending or coming to the end of their careers, or maybe are forced to terminate their career through injury. Some of the work sports psychologists do with these guys and athletes are fantastic. I really, really interesting type of topic. So it's not really sort of performance based. We're not really looking at some of the skills that you can use on the pitch, but we're really looking at them more as a human being rather than an athlete, and understanding that there is a life after sport. How do we help that transition after sport? And that's something that I've really, really enjoyed learning about. And it's sort of helped this Dr. Leanne Sharp, who is a lecturer in the Ulster University's Sports Psych Masters, has loads and loads of research on this as well, and it was fascinating. So her listening to her explain some of the research, and I think that's a really nice sort of end goal for me. I'd love to be working within that, and you can do that for national governing bodies, or you could be involved with the team and doing that as well. But I think the great thing about this profession is that you will probably wear a lot of different hats during your career. I think um, that thinking back to that gaining experience, I think it's good to gain experience, get outside your comfort zone. Any experience is good experience. Start working with populations that you've never really worked with before, in different settings that you've never been in. I think that will really set you up for a successful career in sports psych, because you will find yourself in an environment that you've never been in. So be very, very open to where you're going to go. But I do have that idea of working with athletes in their transitions, and but also it's such a fun profession that you'd find yourself in any sort of environment, and I'd love to be working and enjoying what I'm doing.
Yeah, good stuff. I think the point you make about as well of accepting that it's a human as well, not just an athlete, is really a really interesting one and an interesting field to go down, where you're putting you're speaking, you're working with a human, and then an athlete's just sort of something they do, and it's a nice way to approach it. And yeah, additionally, as you say, getting these experiences across loads of different areas and fields of sport means that maybe you go down the sports psychology route, but there are other opportunities, whether it's through performance or in a more social setting, that you can put these skills to use. So yeah. Final question, just I guess on the future stuff, is obviously you're working with the Glasgow University Women's Rugby team, and you've been able to implement a few of your skills there. How do you see sports psychology developing and growing in grassroots settings? Do you think it's something that could become sort of a permanent part of grassroots setups, or do you think it's maybe not going to get to that level?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more um, sports psychology and exercise psychology. It's going to be a lot more accepted, I think, in grassroots sports. I think beforehand it was something that you'd see in the elite level. Um, People are understanding the benefits of sports and exercise psychology. I think definitely within grassroots sports, it's becoming more accepted. It's becoming also more accessible. So you don't have to be a sports psych to to start to use sports psychology. Coaches within grassroots settings can learn a lot about how they can coach and how they get the best from their athletes. So um, it's maybe not having a sports psychologist there on the side of the pitch or working with a team. It's maybe looking at some of the sports psychology topics that you could implement into your coaching. You as an athlete, you could start to look at some of the strategies that you can implement into your own game. So it's a lot more accepted. It's a lot more accessible now, and I think athletes now are waking up and understanding that there's benefits to this, and I think that's been helped um, through going online, and you can see athletes online talking about their experiences of using visualization and mental imagery. You can go and watch LeBron James on the side of a pitch practice his mindfulness and his meditation, and on the side of the court before a game. So you can see a lot more athletes, especially on TV, these high performance athletes talking about their experiences working with sports psychs, and that's going to trickle down, I think, into that grassroots. sporting environments where people then start to engage with sports psychology and implement that into their own coaching or athletic abilities as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, like, there's a lot of things that people do, or there's a huge talk about the mental game in sport from every level, and we sort of do it without realizing that we're talking about the mental level. And this is sports psychology, but at the end of the day, it's just not been labeled. So I think having this sort of open mind to it, and approach where it's sort of very normally talked about and aware of how people are feeling and how you approach things is only going to benefit grassroots sports. Good stuff. So, Gareth, we've covered a huge amount today, sort of the whole pathway of becoming a sports psychologist, the different routes you can go down, what you learn, as well as a bit about your research project that you're hoping to get published, and around concussion and the social impact of that, and then a wee bit about the future of sports psychology. So, just to conclude, what is, I guess, from everything you've learned and picked up, what is the one thing that someone could include in their training or in their coaching right now that would help benefit a mental performance?
I think for me, whether you're an athlete or a non-athlete, whether you're a sports psychologist or a coach, is reflective practice. It does require some buy-in. I think at the start, maybe I was not entirely sold on the idea. It's just reflective practice. It's maybe something I've done as a student. Maybe after a placement, maybe you have to reflect on what you've done, and it's really just your ability to reflect on maybe your actions. How did you engage in the process? And then it's you learn more about yourself. I think I've started to be a bit more honest with myself. Um, Maybe you do it after your coaching session, a block of coaching sessions, maybe working with um, an athlete or presenting a workshop. I think reflecting on your performance, I think you're a lot more open and honest about yourself, and it leads to this sort of process of continuous learning. I think um, a lot of coaches, especially, it's really, really easy to get stuck. You have to reflect critically to sort of improve. When you're stuck in that rut, I think you become quite comfortable in what you're doing. You're not really reflecting on how you're performing. It might not be any benefit. So I think it's really easy to get started in. There's loads and loads of models that sort of guide you through that reflective practice process. Um, and it does allow you, I think, for me, it's definitely improved my motivation. It will improve the sort of the quality of your coaching and your consultancy work as well, the quality of care that you give that player as well, and it definitely increases your ability to sort of self-direct your learning. So I'm a really, really big fan of effective practice. You do have to buy into it, but once you've bought into it, you'll see the benefits of it. You'll be a bit more open and honest about yourself, and you'll learn loads and loads and loads about how you're practicing, and how you can improve as well.
Amazing, good stuff. And I guess last one, what is we've covered so much, and you've given so many examples about how to learn and how to get involved in sports psychology. But what is your sort of favorite way to continue learning about it, to find out more and to develop yourself?
Um, it's podcasts like these. It's sticking on a podcast if it could be a topic that you're really, really interested in, or a topic that you don't have a clue what it's about. But it's nice to hear someone have a chat and answer or ask questions. And um, podcasts are a fantastic way to sort of introduce yourself into a new topic that you're a bit unsure about. But it also sort of it allows you to sort of it's just a really easy, accessible way to learn and hear sports psychologists talking about their work, their research. And I think it's especially now when we're so connected to our devices, it's nice and so easy just to have a podcast going in your headphones as you're running about town, or doing your wee bits and pieces. It's such a good way to engage in some of the research that they're putting out now, and keeping up to date with some of the topics and research.
Excellent. Yeah, and there's so many out there that you can find something that's your interest, or a presenter or whoever that you like, and learn so much from it. So yeah, such a good way. Well, Gareth, I would like to say a massive thank you for your time today, for everything you covered, the whole insight you've given. You've given such an overall view, and gone into great detail in areas as well. So a massive thank you. And I hope listeners have been able to pick up sort of, especially the pathway and the long journey that it takes to become a sports psychologist, as well as some of the work that they can be involved in. And of course, the experiences and opportunities that you can do right now and get involved in to start developing those skills if you're wanting to go on that journey. So yeah, a massive thank you for today, Gareth.
Super. Thanks, Mel.